In a landmark decision that sent shockwaves across the globe, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down the Trump-era tariffs, effectively ending a years-long trade war that had dramatically reshaped the global economy and altered the way nations do business with each other. In a single morning, the foundation of America's protectionist trade policy crumbled, leaving policymakers, businesses, and citizens grappling with a new reality. Stock markets from New York to Shanghai surged as the news broke, signaling hope for freer trade and renewed optimism for international cooperation. Investors and analysts scrambled to assess the far-reaching implications. The ruling is more than a legal matter. It's a seismic shift in global power and governance, with world leaders now re-evaluating alliances and economic strategies. The case, American Institute for International Steel versus United States, forced the court to decide if the president overstepped constitutional limits by using an old law to justify sweeping tariffs. The debate centered on the balance of power between Congress and the executive branch. The answer: yes. The precedent set today will echo for years, shaping future trade policy and presidential authority. Legal scholars are already calling it a defining moment in constitutional law. For everyday Americans, this means changes in prices, jobs, and economic security. Consumers may see lower costs on imported goods, but uncertainty looms for workers in vulnerable industries. Some industries now face new competition from abroad, raising concerns about layoffs and plant closures, while others breathe easier with cheaper imports and new opportunities to expand their businesses. Small retailers and consumers could benefit from a wider range of products. The economic reshuffling has just begun, and its effects will ripple through communities worldwide, touching lives in ways both expected and unforeseen. The world is watching as the rules of trade are rewritten, and the next chapter in global commerce begins to unfold before our eyes. To grasp the impact of this ruling, we need to revisit 2018 when the Trump administration launched its America First trade war. Tariffs, taxes on imports, were imposed on steel, aluminum, and a wide range of Chinese goods, citing national security and unfair trade. Allies like Canada and the EU were swept up in the conflict, sparking global outrage and retaliation. China hit back with tariffs on American agriculture, escalating a tit-for-tat trade war. Supporters claimed tariffs protected U.S. jobs. Critics warned of higher costs and lost markets. The debate split the nation. Farmers, manufacturers, and consumers all felt the pain. Billions of dollars were at stake, and the world's supply chains were thrown into chaos. The controversy over these tariffs set the stage for a legal showdown. The question: could a president wield such sweeping power alone? The legal battle began when importers challenged the president's authority to impose tariffs under the guise of national security. They argued the law was meant for true emergencies, not broad economic protectionism. The administration claimed a weakened industrial base was a security risk, justifying executive action. Lower courts were split, and the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case. The stakes: defining the limits of presidential power in trade. Oral arguments focused on the meaning of national security and the separation of powers. The justices questioned whether the president could bypass Congress to reshape the economy. The world watched, knowing the outcome would set a precedent for future leaders. This was about more than steel. It was about the balance of power in Washington. The decision would determine who controls America's economic destiny. On October 28, 2025, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 against the Trump administration's tariffs. Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "Executive power in national security is broad, but not unlimited. The president must show a direct, credible threat, not just economic concerns, to justify such tariffs." The ruling didn't strike down the law, but set strict limits on its use. Dissenters argued for more presidential leeway, but the majority prevailed. The White House acknowledged the decision, promising to review its trade approach. Business leaders celebrated a victory for free enterprise. The tariffs were immediately dismantled, and the process of economic adjustment began. The court's decision redefined the boundaries of executive power. The era of unilateral trade wars was over. The world braced for what would come next. The Supreme Court's decision unleashed a wave of optimism in global markets. U.S. stocks soared, led by industries hurt by tariffs. Europe and Asia saw similar rallies. Allies like Canada and the EU welcomed the ruling, hoping for renewed cooperation. China's response was cautious, noting unresolved disputes but acknowledging the shift. Currency and commodity markets reacted swiftly. Steel and aluminum prices fell, the dollar dipped. U.S. producers worried about new competition, while importers and manufacturers cheered. The global economic map was redrawn overnight. Governments and corporations scrambled to adapt to the new reality. The decision signaled a return to open trade, but also new uncertainties. The world's trading system was in flux once again. The next moves would shape the future of global commerce. The ruling's impact is now rippling through the real economy, touching every corner of American industry and daily life. What began as a policy decision in government offices is now being felt on the ground, in the places where goods are made, sold, and bought. Automakers and builders are among the first to benefit from cheaper imported materials. With lower input costs, they can produce vehicles and homes more affordably, potentially passing savings on to consumers. This could mean more jobs in these sectors, as demand for new cars and construction projects rises. But for domestic steel and aluminum producers, the landscape has shifted dramatically. Once shielded by tariffs, these industries now face fierce global competition, forcing them to innovate, cut costs, or risk losing market share to foreign rivals. In steel towns across the country, workers are anxious. The threat of layoffs and plant closures looms large, and entire communities worry about their future as the industry adapts to new realities. For everyday consumers, the changes bring hope for relief at the checkout counter. Prices on goods like cars, appliances, and canned foods are expected to drop, making household budgets stretch a little further. The inflationary pressure that tariffs once created will begin to ease, but the effects won't be immediate. It will take time for lower costs to work their way through supply chains and into store prices. The ruling reshuffles the deck of winners and losers. Farmers, manufacturers, and workers in different sectors all feel the change in unique ways, some gaining new opportunities, others facing fresh challenges. Political and social tensions may shift as communities adjust, but economic anxieties remain. People gather in town halls and community centers, debating what the future holds for their jobs and families. The debate over free trade versus protectionism is far from settled. Lawmakers, business leaders, and experts continue to argue over the best path forward, each side weighing the costs and benefits. The battleground has moved from the White House and the halls of power to the heart of American communities, where the consequences of these decisions are lived every day. The effects will be felt on factory floors, in the aisles of supermarkets, and in the daily routines of millions of Americans, shaping the way we work, shop, and live. The story of American trade is being rewritten in real time, with each new headline and every shift in the marketplace adding a new chapter to this unfolding drama. Experts across multiple fields agree. This Supreme Court decision marks a pivotal turning point for both trade policy and constitutional law in the United States. Many are calling it one of the most significant rulings in recent decades, with far-reaching consequences that will shape the nation's economic and political landscape for years to come. Economists are forecasting long-term economic growth as market distortions caused by previous trade policies begin to fade. However, they caution that the transition won't be painless. Some workers and industries may face short-term challenges, including job losses and restructuring, as the market adjusts to the new legal framework. Still, many believe that a more stable and predictable trade environment will ultimately benefit the broader economy. Legal scholars are hailing the decision as a landmark case for the separation of powers. They argue it reaffirms the constitutional principle that presidents must work with Congress when making major decisions on trade, restoring a crucial system of checks and balances that had eroded over time. Political analysts see this as a major shift away from unilateral executive action. They predict a renewed emphasis on diplomacy, negotiation, and alliance building, both within the U.S. government and with international partners, as the country redefines its approach to global trade. Industry voices remain divided. Importers and manufacturers who rely on global supply chains are celebrating the decision, hopeful for lower costs and increased competitiveness. Meanwhile, steel and aluminum producers, who benefited from previous protections, are expressing deep concern about their future and the potential for increased foreign competition. In Congress, the ruling has sparked urgent debate. Some lawmakers and policy experts are urging the creation of new tools to address unfair trade practices and protect American jobs, while others warn that too much protectionism could harm consumers and stifle innovation. The Supreme Court's decision has ignited a nationwide and even global debate about America's evolving role in the world economy. Commentators are weighing in on how this new era of shared power will affect international trade relationships and the US's position as a global leader. The consensus among experts is clear. The era of unchecked executive power in trade policy is over. The balance of authority is shifting, and both the executive and legislative branches will need to collaborate more closely than ever before. The challenge now is to find the right balance, keeping markets open and competitive, while also providing support and retraining for industries and workers who are most vulnerable to change. The national conversation about what fair trade means for America's future is just beginning. Business leaders, workers, and policymakers are all weighing in, eager to shape the next chapter of U.S. trade policy. Around the world, governments, investors, and citizens are watching closely to see how the United States adapts to this new reality, knowing that the ripple effects will be felt far beyond its borders. The Supreme Court's ruling has upended Washington's political landscape. President Harris's administration gains a chance to reset trade policy and rebuild alliances, but faces pressure to protect American jobs. Expect a pivot to targeted enforcement, WTO actions, and domestic investment. Republicans must reckon with the loss of a key America First tool, fueling debate within the party. Some call for new laws to restore presidential tariff power. Others seek bipartisan reforms. Congress is now the battleground, with new coalitions forming around trade policy. Free trade advocates and protectionists are vying for influence. The future of American trade will be shaped by these political battles. The outcome is uncertain, but the debate is more intense than ever. The next chapter will be written in Congress, not the courts. The Supreme Court's decision marks the end of an era, and the start of a new one. America's power to regulate trade is now a shared responsibility, not a presidential prerogative. The ruling brings relief to markets, but anxiety to industrial communities. Policymakers must now craft a modern trade framework that balances open markets with support for workers. The debate is shifting, not whether to have tariffs, but what comes next. The world is watching as the U.S. redefines its role in global commerce. The story is far from over. What happens next will shape the future of trade. The era of the Great Trade War is over, but the challenge of fair and effective policy remains.